Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is going to be a special share on how we can cope with the many challenges that are happening um, daily, hourly, and even by the second. First of all, I want to mention to everyone that um, we're dedicating this year in honor of all the soldiers that unfortunately are about uh, to have the tremendous responsibility to protect Eretz Yisrael. Fortunately, they have this chut, but unfortunately, they may be in danger, and therefore, our learning Torah is a major way of protecting them. As the Gemara says, that Torah Megina Umatzla, Torah protects and it protects from danger. There are obviously a number of ways how to protect from danger. Our soldiers are doing their job, and there are other ways, of course, and we are doing part of what we're doing is to keep up the Torah learning. And I thank Rabbi Diamond for organizing and orchestrating these shiurim. And I thank Mordechai and Raya Meltz for making it possible and hosting our shiurim over here on Zoom and to be posted soon on our YouTube channel, which has, Baruch Hashem, close to 1,100 videos on the Chabad of Rechavia YouTube channel. Let us say one pasuk together before we begin the special shir. Please repeat after me. Adonai, Hoshia, Hamelech, Ya'anenu, V'yom Karenu.
Adonai, Hoshea, HaMelech.
Ya'anenu, V'yom Karenu. Okay. We are now dealing with a very, very difficult situation. And I'm not talking about the war. I'm not talking about the military that has to deal with an unprecedented threat, not only threat, um, uh, murder and terror from our enemies around Eretz Yisrael. Part of what the enemies are trying to do is to implant fear, and that itself is a war which perhaps is even greater than the physical war, because I myself know of at least one person who totally went crazy because of the videos that are being, the brutal videos that Hamas is sending around. And unfortunately, many of us cannot control ourselves. We open them up, we watch them, and what's even worse than that is that we send them around. We have no clue, we have no idea the negative impact, long-term impact, negative, horrendous, horrific impact that it can have on us. And if not immediately, then chas v'shalom in the next 5, 10 years and beyond. And this is what I want to elaborate upon. The power that our vision has upon us. I'd like to start with an interesting episode that is recorded in the Torah in the second parsha of Devarim, Deuteronomy. That is Parashat Va'etchanan. Va'etchanan al Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu recounts that he begged Hashem to go into Eretz Yisrael. Now we understand, sort of, why Hashem told him he cannot go into Eretz Yisrael. Because he did not sanctify Hashem's name when he could have on a very large level. So for Moshe Rabbeinu, that's considered something which is wrong, and therefore, this is his punishment. For a tzaddik who is perfect, even the smallest sin, so to speak, is considered perhaps something which can be large. For example, if you take a white sheet and you make a tiny dot on it, you can see it from a mile away. While a black or a colored sheet, you cannot tell it almost at all. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing Am Yisrael right to the brinks of coming into Eretz Yisrael. And Hashem says, I'm sorry, I'm not accepting your 515 prayers. Don't say even one more prayer. And then a couple of verses afterwards, Hashem tells Moshe, go up onto the mountain and gaze, look at Eretz Yisrael. Yama, Tzafona, Vakedma, Mizracha. To all the four directions. To the west, to the north, to the east, and to the south. So what is the point of Hashem telling Moshe to go up onto the mountain and look at Eretz Yisrael? Not just to look at Eretz Yisrael, to look at the entire Eretz Yisrael, all the directions of Eretz Yisrael. Was Hashem, God forbid, teasing him? Can't be. Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem wouldn't tease anyone. But Moshe Rabbeinu, of all people, this was perhaps his greatest wish. He was looking forward to this for such a long time. And begging, even after the decree was made, he keeps on begging Hashem, please let me go into Eretz Yisrael. And then Hashem says, go onto the mountain and gaze to the entire land. The explanation is that obviously Hashem is not teasing Moshe. So what is the point of having Moshe go up onto the mountain and to look all around Eretz Yisrael to all directions? The point is as follows. Let's first explain what the eye is. The human eye, Hashem created the eye to look around. When we look, we don't only see the exact thing that we're looking at. Hashem created us also with a visual field that we see all around in the whole area. Now, typically, a regular person thinks that the eye simply takes in information. When you look at something, when you gaze at something, you're taking in the information. The brain translates that info that the eye brought it in, that the eye mirrors, and then it processes it, your mind processes it, you should understand what's going on. All this happens literally in nanoseconds, if not less. But we have to realize that vision is not only taking in information, but when you look at something, or let's use the word stare, when you stare at something, then that can have an impact. Looking at something and having something in mind while you're looking at it can have an impact on the object. Or if it's a person, can have an impact on the person. So you're probably thinking to yourself, what do you mean? How can it have an impact? There's nothing connecting between us. There's only air. So what exactly is it that you're imposing on the person? But we don't have to go too far. If you're in a room with a bunch of people, sometimes you're sitting in the front, and you have an instinct that someone in the back of the room is watching you, is looking at you, is thinking about you. You turn around and you see the guy is actually staring at you. That's unbelievable, but it's true. Many of us know that this is true. It's happened to us. It's happened to me. So what is it that made the person in the front of the room turn around? It's exactly what we mentioned earlier. For someone, an individual who looks at someone else, you can send them a message. you can make the person think about you. There's a similar concept of thinking about a person even if they're not in that room. Sometimes you just have the insight, the desire to call someone, and the guy says, "I was just thinking about you." There's an interesting story about at the previous Rebbe's Farbrengen in the early 40s. He was sitting at a Farbrengen, and someone, one of the few Chassidim were there, and the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, was discussing the subject in Hebrew called Machshava Mo'elet. Thought helps. When you think about someone, it causes the other person to think about you. This is also a very powerful subject in the relationship between a Rebbe and a Chassid. It says that the Rebbe every day thinks about all of the Chassidim, and that inspires the Chassidim to mirror and to think about the Rebbe. So here, the previous Rebbe is sitting at a Farbrengen, and he's explaining this concept that thought helps. And one of the Chassidim said to the Rebbe, "But Rebbe, what do you mean? How is it possible? Just because one person thinks about the other, that means the other person is going to think back about that person?" So the previous Rebbe answered him very sharp, very concisely, and he says, "Where were you last year at this day?" That's all he had to say. He didn't have to say any more. The Chassid right away understood that he was in Russia on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And what the previous Rebbe was hinting was basically indicating that because the previous Rebbe, because I thought about you in Russia, that brought the bracha that you should be able to get out of there and to come here and be here today with us. So let's get back to a similar concept, which is our subject, which is the idea of vision. It's a little more practical than just thought. Thought is a little more lofty. Here you're looking, you're staring at someone. So you can cause that the other person should be influenced in some way by the fact that you're looking at them. Now, this is the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu was told to go up to the mountain. What Hashem was essentially telling him was as follows: you cannot go into Eretz Yisrael now, unfortunately. It's not an option. Stop praying for it. It is what it is. You have to remain on this side of the border. Nonetheless, your nation is going to be going into Israel under the leadership of Yehoshua. Because you are the leader right now, you are the Moshe, and Moshe is connected to every single Jew, even if they're not physically together. Moshe can be on the other side of the border, and Am Yisrael will be going into Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, Moshe needs to be connected to them even while they're in Eretz Yisrael. So just by the mere fact that Moshe is going up onto the mountain and he's going to gaze powerfully onto every direction, every piece of Israel, that is going to inspire Am Yisrael. That's going to give us the koach, the energy, to be able to inhabit Eretz Yisrael, to bring more bracha to Eretz Yisrael. But in a sense, it's all thanks to Moshe Rabbeinu's gazing, looking hard at Eretz Yisrael. So what do we see from here? That when you look at something, you can really influence in a very, very strong way. The Mishnah tells us in the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of Our Fathers, I believe it's Mishnah number 10. The Mishnah says that the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, each one said something special. One of them said, what is the most important? Each one said, what is the most important thing to have? The most important midah, characteristic, or whatever it is. And so one of them said, Lev Tov, You should have a good heart. Another one said chaver tov. You should have a good friend. Another one said shachen tov. You should have a good neighbor. If you have these, then you have everything basically. That's each one was trying to bring out their own point. And then here's the point that I'm trying to say. One of the rabbis said, "Ayin tova," having a good eye. What does that mean? A good eye. Typically, we've heard about, God forbid, ayin ra'ah, an evil eye. That's a terrible thing. So then people think they know what ayin ra'ah is or ayin hara, but what's ayin tova? What's a good eye? So in order to really understand what ayin hara is, this, which is what we're discussing right now, let's talk about the positive. Instead of speaking about the negative, about an evil eye, let's talk about the positive eye. Ayin tova is a very special blessing to have. Every person has their own talents. And if we can develop, if we can nurture having an ayin tova, having a good eye, then perhaps that really is the greatest bracha. What is ayin tova? Ayin tova means to look at every situation, tov, good, in a positive sense. There are positive people out there, and unfortunately, there are negative people out there. So let's try to magnet to someone who looks at the world and looks at each other with a good eye. So if, for example, you see someone in the street or someone in shul or someone in the store, and it seems to be they did something wrong, instead of right away being critical, as unfortunately human beings are, right away we're critical. Let's try to look at the person ayin tova. Let's say to ourselves, 1 second, what could be the reason why this person said this? Or what could be the reason why this person acted in such a way? It doesn't befit them. They don't usually act like this. Why would someone do that? It must be they woke up on the wrong side, or they didn't know what they were doing. Let's put it this way, between us. But let's not share with anyone. Just you and I. Between us, when it comes to ourselves, we can find 100 million excuses why we did A or B. It could be it says clearly why not to that we should not do it, but we could figure out excuses why it's not so bad. No one knows, and etc. We could write not one book, a set of several volumes of excuses why to do or not to do anything. All of a sudden, when it comes to someone else, then we all of a sudden we're critical. Oy vey, what did he do? Or what did my spouse do? Or what did my partner do in business? Well, how did he do that? And how did he do this? And why is this? Come on. Let's just switch it around, okay? For the other person, let's find a zechut, a merit. Let's look at the other person with an ayin tova, with a good eye. And for ourselves, let's be critical. Oh, it's not so easy. I understand. But at least we should have a goal. One thing is unacceptable: to look at someone else with an ayin hara, with a bad eye. For ourselves, maybe we have to work on ourselves to be a little more critical, not in a negative way, but in a way that's going to help us grow in our Yiddishkeit, to be more connected to Hashem, to demand from ourselves more, double, triple. Rabbi Evan Yisroel, Adin Steinsaltz, of blessed memory, he tells over in a video that you can see on YouTube, he tells over that he came to the Rebbe, and he said he has 3 major projects that he's involved in addition to all the regular obligations that he had. And someone came to him with a big offer to do a 4th major project. So he asked the Rebbe, should I take it on? If I do, I'm going to have to take off from my position from at least one other major project because I just can't do everything. So the Rebbe explained to him, and he in the video explains very nicely. The Rebbe basically said, "Of course you should take it on. This is an opportunity for you to add more in Yiddishkeit and to bring more people involved." And so he explains how it's possible to bring on more stuff. But that's the Rebbe's approach. The Rebbe's approach is always to increase in our commitment to Hashem. And so the Ayin Tovah gives us an ability to look at someone else and say, 1 second, this person really means well. You know what? Let me go and help the person. And perhaps this is also very important for us to remember in these current, most difficult days of the war. We have to train ourselves to look at another person with Ahavat Yisroel. How do we do Ahavat? It's very easy to say Ahavat Yisroel, love your fellow Jew, but you need to have tools. What specifically should we do? One person, we can give them a hug. Another person, we can listen to them. Another person is Ayin Tovah. Just by the fact, even without saying anything, just by the mere fact that you see a person and you say hello and you look at the person from with a positive eye, that is definitely something that Hashem wants to see, especially in these most challenging times. There's a similar concept which is related to this idea of Ayin Tovah. But before I do that, I first want to wrap up the main point, which I'm sure we'll get to again a little later on. We started this year based on the subject on how do we cope with the many recordings and videos, many of them horrific videos, of what our animal-like enemies are doing to our own brothers and sisters and have done in the past few days. When you look at something, the vision, whether it's a video or a picture, that has a long-term effect on a person. We have no clue when it can, God forbid, have a very negative effect on our psyche. This is why it's so important for a person to look at a tzaddik. When you look at a tzaddik and you see the shine from Hashem coming from them, that itself has a tremendous positive effect on the person. Because I like talking about in the positive sense. Of course, looking at a rasha, an evil person, or at immoral images, that can have a terrible effect on a person's neshama. This is why it says in Bereshit, Parshat Vayeshev, that Yosef HaTzadik was put in a very, very difficult test with the wife of Potiphar. And what saved him? The image of his father was in his mind. He was very, very tempted to do a sin, which the wife of Potiphar tried to impose upon him. She tried to grab him, and she only had his jacket because he fled away. But he had many excuses. He could have said, no one in the world is ever going to know about this. And it was imposed on him. But the image of Yaakov Avinu, the image of this great tzaddik, Yosef's father, was in his mind, in Yosef's mind. And that helped him overcome one of the most challenging tests that one can ever imagine. From here we see how important it is to have an image of a tzaddik in our mind at all times. One of the greatest brachas that we have is that the outburst of technology happened during our Rebbe, when he gave a lot of talks and videos of dollars, and some of the videos that I've been sending around encouraging how important it is to support Eretz Yisrael, and that Eretz Yisrael is the safest place in the world. And we've seen tremendous, tremendous miracles, and we daven to Hashem that there should be only continuous miracles. There are some people who spend many hours watching videos of the Rebbe's Farbrengens. A Chassid from the Ger dynasty. They have a big center in Geula area. He came over to me once and he said, if you didn't have videos, so many hours on end of videos of the Rebbe, I would never be able to believe that it's true what they tell me. Today, Baruch Hashem, you can see so many videos of so many great Rabbanim there's a positive impact. And needless to say, or maybe we do need to say, not to waste time in watching all kinds of garbage, especially if the Torah says, "V'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareim." We see in the Shema, in the third portion of the Shema, we should not let our eyes look at different places that are immoral, whether it's murder or incest, chas v'shalom. We're not allowed to allow ourselves to put ourselves in such a situation. And therefore, we need to make sure that our phones are well filtered. There are plenty of ways. Every person can choose based on their own Rav what applies to them. But the Chabad Rabbanim of Eretz Yisrael, they have their own system based on NetSpark. And this is very important for us to remember. But getting back to our scenario right now of the war, if we will allow ourselves to watch even 10 seconds of the murder, the horrific murder that the Rishaim that they're doing, they've done. Hopefully, it's only something. If we sit and we allow ourselves to Chas v'Shalom, who knows the long term effect? Because refined, the most refined thing that we have, that Hashem gave us in our being. Usually we have the sense of touching, if you want to know if something is real. But just like fire, which is light, and warmth is also something which is spiritual, also our vision is something very, very sensitive, very spiritual. So we have to be extra careful in what we look at and what we watch. On a similar note, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, chapter 8, the Alter Rebbe talks about not reading books that have philosophy, or even if the author was served idols or is an immoral person, we're not allowed to read their literature. Because when you read it, it comes into our mind, and similar to our eyes, our mind is also the brain is very, very delicate. And so any little thing can have a big impact on the brain. So the same thing, just like we said about the vision, that we have to be careful who we look at, where we look, because that information that's processed in our brains can have, God forbid, a long-term negative impact on the person. So too, also reading, which is also vision, but it's mainly about the brain, the same concept, but the brain processes things which can have different, God forbid, different ideas of denial of Hashem's existence. So if a person reads something that was written by a person who himself has doubts in God, chas v'shalom, or worse, we're not allowed to read those because that can chas v'shalom implant doubts in our own minds. Now let's move on to another point which is very similar, and that is speech. Up until now, we talked about vision, which is very important, and that's the main subject of what the title is, of how we can cope with the influx of videos, which are very, very tempting. But one of the most important rules of the Tanya is one word in Aramaic: itkafia. Aleph Taf Kaf Fe Yud Aleph, or in English, itkafia. What's itkafia? Means self-control. Some people think, what do you want from me? Someone sent it to me. I have to watch it. How could you tell me not to watch it? This video of any sort. The answer is, the Alter Rebbe says we were created in such a way that mind controls the heart. There are 4 Hebrew words. Moach shalit al halev. The mind controls on the heart. So a person can say, what do you mean? I really, really want to see it. I have to see it. What do you mean? It's 100 excuses. The answer is just control yourself. Not just in this subject, but this is relevant to what we're talking about now. Just think for a moment of the negative impact that it can have on you for many, many years to come. Why do it? It can be extremely tempting, especially when it comes to statuses. If it's a video that's sent to you, so just shut it off or erase it, and that's it. But the status, well, you just have to give a click, and you see it broken up, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. And it's very, very easy to get caught up, even if you didn't plan it. But if you know that there's a video that's coming up, for example, sometimes they write, beware of the images that are going to be shown in the next status. So don't open the next status. It's only a tap. Just touch it. One can say, I'm just going to touch it. What did I do? Don't touch it. Don't give in. Stand strong. Your mind is much more powerful than you can ever imagine, and use that mind power. Apparently, we use barely 6 or 7% of our mind power. The more Chassidus we learn, the more we become involved, the more we become into this amazing way of life of itkafia, to control our desires, our quote-unquote temptations. So a person will say, well, I can't. The answer is you can. Maybe you're not aware of the power that Hashem gave you. No problem. Let's sit down together. Let's talk about it. Let's learn Chassidus. Let's learn Tanya. And when we learn Tanya, we become more and more aware of the powers that we already have. So it's not like inventing the wheel from scratch. We have the powers already. We just need to be empowered to use them, and to use them better and better, because as time goes along, there are more and more temptations, unfortunately, that present themselves to us on a regular basis. So therefore, we have to learn more and more Chassidus in order to help us, to give us the power and the tools to be able to control our temptations. Now let's move on to the speech. We say that you have to say good things. Not allowed to say lashon hara. Not allowed to say bad talk. The classical example is, you have 3 people, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven is talking to Shimon about Levi. He says to him, you know what Levi did? You won't believe it. And the guy says, yeah, let me hear. Let's hear. Oh boy, that's terrible. And I'm not even going to talk now, maybe soon, about sending messages to other people how much more so people in a group, in a WhatsApp group, or an email group. That's terrible. But let's start with just three individuals. Reuven talks to Shimon about Levi. Did you hear what Levi did? And then Shimon hears it. So Reuven now committed a sin. But it's interesting that the Talmud says that God forbid if someone talks Lashon Hara, Katlit Lisai, it kills three people, quote unquote. Doesn't mean literally, it means spiritually. It means Chas v'shalom, it can, excuse me, please. Excuse me. Chas v'shalom, it can hurt. Lashon Hara can hurt three people. Who are they? Reuven, he's the guy that said it. Shimon, he's the guy that it was told to. And then Levi, who was told about. So the question is, why should it kill all three? Why should it hurt all three? Seemingly, it should only hurt Reuven. He's the one that said it. What's it Levi's fault? Levi maybe did something wrong. Maybe it was a small thing. Maybe it was a big thing. He maybe did something wrong. But maybe he's in a different city. Maybe he's in a different country, even a different continent. So he's not even there. He's probably not aware, and he may never be aware that something negative was said about him. So why should it hurt him? Why should it kill him or damage him, God forbid? Reuven, we can understand. He said the negative thing about Levi. Shimon, we'll talk about in a second, but you know what? We could sort of understand. He was like, yeah, let me hear. That sounds cool. Oy vavoy, look what he did. Terrible, terrible. But Levi, why should he suffer? Why should he be hurt, God forbid? And the answer is a similar answer, a very similar answer to what we said before about vision. Looking at someone with a good eye and looking at someone with a bad eye. When someone says with their mouth something good, you create good energy. And you bring about that good things should happen. If you say something good about a specific person or to a specific person, you can bring them bracha, blessing. It's self-understood that if, God forbid, someone says something negative about someone, then that can chas v'shalom bring evil. Let's say, for example, someone did something really, really great, something really, really good on a large level. So that can bring a huge bracha. What happens if someone did something small? Maybe it brings a bracha. Maybe we don't know how the bracha can be actualized, but did something good. If someone does something small, that's a negative thing, a sin, then maybe Hashem would overlook it and say, you know what? It's a small thing. Maybe the person doesn't deserve a punishment. Let's move on. But because Reuven came along and he said to Shimon, did you hear what Levi did? And he said what Levi did, that can chas v'shalom bring the opposite of a bracha for Levi. Why? Because the fact itself that you speak, the air that we breathe, that is powerful. Someone can ask, what do you mean? It's just hot air. I just said something. I didn't really hit the guy. I just said something negative that he did. So who cares? If I was just talking just in the field, no one heard, would it make a difference? And the answer is we don't know if it for sure, but it definitely, God forbid, can. So let's talk about the positive sense. If you say something good about someone, whatever, say, Kol hakavod, you came to shul. Kol hakavod that you did this mitzvah. Wonderful. You brought good energy, and you brought the person bracha. if perhaps it may have been overlooked, and Hashem will say, wow, it's so beautiful for me to see that these two friends, these two individuals, even people who may not have ever been in contact, but the fact itself that you go over to someone in the street and you say, how are you doing? Shalom. Or in this situation, we have a bracha, we say a bracha together for our soldiers. People smile at me when I say that because they see that we're all one. We're all caring about each other. And this quote unquote short tefillah, this short prayer that we say, is not just hot air. It can be very, very powerful. And we have to use this koach, this power, to bring good bracha. So in summary of what the point that I'm trying to bring out is that vision is very powerful. It's not just looking at something. You're taking in information. When you look at someone, you're giving them power just by looking at them. Gazing, looking, staring, that can have, hopefully with a good eye, that can have a very, very huge impact on the person. And also, speech, of course, is powerful. Listening, we have to be very careful what we listen to. Only kosher music, only music which is Hasidic, Jewish, something with a pasuk, something which has a positive connotation, and not, God forbid, written by someone who has done terrible sins or denies God's existence. So, in summary, Hashem gave us gates, she'arecha, gates. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect people around us. We have to, not only children, but also adults and also elderly people. No one can say, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm protected. No one in the world is protected. We constantly have to remind ourselves how careful we have to be, how to protect our children, how to protect our parents. We constantly have to update the filter for our phones and computers to make sure that no pop-ups come up, and for sure not to go into any forbidden websites, whether they deal with murder or other terrible things. We have to be really careful. And so thank you very much for joining me in this special shir. I hope, Bezrat Hashem, that we can all be extra careful to send around this shir to as many places as possible, that even if each and every one of us can protect one person from not being affected negatively from those horrific videos, dayenu, that would be enough. How much more so if we can send it around? B'ezrat Hashem, I'll send it around when Mordechai and Raya send me the recording, the YouTube link, that B'ezrat Hashem, we should be able to protect ourselves, people that are close to us, our loved ones, and people that we come in contact with. And today, with social media, we can reach places that you could never ever dream that you would ever be able to reach on the other side of the world, people that are totally on another plane. But because you are sending them this video or trying to inspire them in any other way, that is a bracha that we have today that we did not have in the last 5,784 years since the creation of the world. So Toda Rabba, may Hashem protect our soldiers and police force and Hatzalah and ambulance and all the emergency personnel. Of course, each and every one of us. Shalom, shalom, Toda Rabba.